This is the first part of our Empire series, where we'll be covering the rise and fall of history's greatest empires. Our story begins in Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This is where the world's first cities appeared, such as Uruk and Ur. For centuries, these cities competed with each other, sometimes peacefully trading, but often going to war. That all changed with Sargon of Akkad. Originally a servant at the royal court of Kish, he seized power and built a professional army. Around 2334 BCE, Sargon launched a series of conquests that united all the Sumerian city-states under his control. For the first time in history, different peoples and lands were ruled by one central authority. That's why historians usually call the Akkadian Empire the world's first true empire. The Akkadians didn't just rule by force, they created systems that helped them control a large territory, roads for communication, governors to oversee conquered lands, and a common Akkadian language that spread across Mesopotamia. Sargon also founded a new capital, Akkad, which became the political heart of the empire. But no empire lasts forever. After nearly 2 centuries, the Akkadians faced invasions from mountain tribes called the Gutians, as well as widespread drought and famine. These pressures weakened the empire until it finally collapsed around 2154 BCE. Mesopotamia fell back into smaller kingdoms, but the idea of empire had been born. After the Akkadian Empire fell, Mesopotamia eventually saw the rise of another great power, Babylon. The city itself was founded earlier, but it became truly important around 1894 BCE, when the first Babylonian dynasty was established. The most famous king of this period was Hammurabi. He is remembered for creating the Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest written legal systems in history. It included hundreds of laws covering everything from trade and marriage to theft and property rights. The laws were carved into stone steles placed in public so that everyone could see them. This helped unify Babylon's diverse population under a single system of justice. Centuries later, Babylon rose again as the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Its most famous ruler was Nebuchadnezzar II, who reigned from 605 to 562 BCE. Under him, Babylon reached its peak. He is traditionally linked to the construction of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And he is also known for conquering Jerusalem and exiling the Jewish population. Babylon's glory ended in 539 BCE, when the Persian king Cyrus the Great marched into the city. Instead of destroying it, Cyrus absorbed Babylon into the vast Persian Empire. This marked the end of Babylon as an independent empire, though the city itself remained an important cultural and administrative center for centuries. Egypt is one of the oldest continuous civilizations in the world. Around 3100 BCE, King Narmer united Upper and Lower Egypt, creating a single kingdom that lasted for thousands of years. For much of this time, however, Egypt wasn't technically an empire. It was a powerful kingdom, but its influence rarely stretched far beyond the Nile River Valley. That changed during what historians call the New Kingdom, beginning around 1550 BCE. After expelling foreign rulers known as the Hyksos, Egypt entered its most ambitious phase of expansion. Pharaohs like Thutmose III led campaigns into the Levant, while others pushed south into Nubia, rich in gold and resources. These conquests brought wealth, tribute, and slaves back to Egypt, transforming it from a kingdom into a true empire. The New Kingdom also gave rise to some of Egypt's most famous figures. Hatshepsut, one of the few female pharaohs, expanded trade networks and commissioned impressive temples. Ramses II, often called Ramses the Great, secured Egypt's borders and left behind vast monuments like Abu Simbel. At its height, Egypt controlled territories from the Sudan to modern-day Syria. But like other empires, it eventually declined. Invasions from the Sea Peoples, internal struggles, and weak rulers slowly reduced its power. By the first millennium BCE, Egypt was often ruled by outsiders, though its culture remained influential for centuries. While Mesopotamia and Egypt were building empires, another power was rising in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. These were the Hittites, who established their empire around 1600 BCE with their capital at Hattusa. The Hittites were an Indo-European people, and they became one of the major powers of the ancient Near East. They were among the first to make widespread use of iron weapons, which gave them a military advantage over neighbors still using bronze. Their armies also relied heavily on chariots, making them dangerous opponents on the battlefield. One of the most famous events involving the Hittites was the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE, where they clashed with Pharaoh Ramses II of Egypt. This was one of the largest chariot battles in history. Neither side achieved a decisive victory, but the aftermath is remarkable. It led to the world's first known peace treaty, agreed between the Hittites and Egyptians. The Hittite Empire eventually collapsed around 1178 BCE during the wider Bronze Age collapse. A combination of invasions, internal struggles, and famine brought their kingdom to an end. Their capital, Hattusa, was destroyed and abandoned, and the Hittites disappeared as a major power. The Assyrians built not one but two major empires. The first, known as the Middle Assyrian Empire, emerged around 1400 BCE, but their most famous period came later with the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which lasted from 911 to 609 BCE. The Assyrians became infamous in history for their military power and their reputation for brutality. They perfected the art of siege warfare using battering rams, siege towers, and advanced tactics to break through city walls. Their armies were also among the first to use large-scale iron weaponry, giving them an edge over rivals who still relied on bronze. At their height, the Assyrians controlled a territory stretching from Egypt in the west to the Persian Gulf in the east, the largest empire the world had seen up to that point. They ruled through a combination of fear and efficiency. Conquered peoples were often deported and relocated to different parts of the empire, making rebellion harder. To govern such a wide region, they developed a sophisticated administrative system dividing the empire into provinces, each overseen by officials loyal to the king. The empire's capital cities, such as Nineveh and Ashur, became centers of culture and learning. The Royal Library of Nineveh, created under King Ashurbanipal, preserved thousands of clay tablets, including the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. But despite their power, the Assyrians made many enemies. In 612 BCE, a coalition of Babylonians and Medes rose against them, destroying Nineveh. By 609 BCE, the Neo-Assyrian Empire had collapsed completely, bringing an end to one of the most feared states in history. The last of the great early empires was the Persian Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great around 550 BCE. In just a few decades, Cyrus and his successors built the largest empire the world had ever seen, stretching from Greece in the west to the Indus Valley in the east. One of the main reasons for Persia's success was its policy of tolerance. Unlike the Assyrians, who ruled through fear, the Persians allowed conquered peoples to keep their own customs, languages, and religions. This made subjects less likely to rebel. Cyrus is even remembered in the Cyrus Cylinder, an inscription often described as the first declaration of human rights, because it records how he freed captive peoples and respected local traditions. The Persians also created an efficient system to manage their vast empire. They divided it into regions called satrapies, each governed by a satrap or provincial governor. They built the Royal Road, a network that allowed couriers to travel hundreds of miles in just days, ensuring messages and orders could move quickly across the empire. At its peak, the Achaemenid Empire ruled nearly half of the world's population, the highest percentage ever controlled by a single state. But its size also made it vulnerable. In 330 BCE, Alexander the Great of Macedonia invaded and, within a few years, conquered the entire Persian Empire. Despite its fall, the Achaemenid model of administration and governance influenced later empires for centuries. Those were just the first 6 empires. We'll be covering the rest in upcoming videos as part of this Empires series, so if you've been enjoying the journey so far, make sure to stay tuned. And in the meantime, feel free to check out some of our other history videos. From every century over the last 2 millennia, to philosophers like Plato and Socrates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.